King's Landing, as we well know, is the newest and largest of the 5 cities of Westeros, and in comparison grew very quickly. Thus, while the original layout of King's Landing was a confusing mess of unorganised alleys and streets, crossing like a maze. Hence, why King Jaehaerys I, from 42 AC during the early part of his reign, invested huge amounts of his own time and money into completely redeveloping the city into what is recognisably the King's Landing we see today. Much of the city was torn down, and the streets widened, and some even had cobblestones laid to replace the thick mud and dirt they had before. Care was even taken to make these new streets somewhat pleasant, with the inclusion of lots of greenery and trees, and in some places even stone statues and works of art. Some of Queen Alysanne's clean drinking water fountains would be placed along these new streets. The new King's Landing would have 7 main streets that would become the lifeblood of the city, as well as several other ways, which proved as a means of getting across the city quickly. It seems like 7 streets in particular were built, much like the 7 gates of King's Landing. However, it is also very possible that it was all just a coincidence. Again, whether intentional or not, these streets would become the focus of the key trades of the city, and it was via these trades most of the streets would get their names. Ned turned off the square where the Street of Steel began and followed its winding path up a long hill, past blacksmiths working at open forges, free riders haggling over mail shirts, and grizzled ironmongers selling old blades and razors from their wagons. The further they climbed, the larger the buildings grew. The Thoughts of Eddard Stark, A Game of Thrones Chapter 27, Eddard 6. The Street of Steel begins on the southwest corner of Fishmonger Square and climbs up Visenya's Hill until the Great Sept of Baelor. Most smiths of the capital had their forges on the street, with it commonly said that the higher up the street one goes, the more expensive the shops. At its top is the shop of Tobho Mott, one of the more famous smiths in the city during the later reign of King Robert Baratheon. Tobho Mott's shop is made of timber and plaster and is larger than all the other buildings on the Street of Steel. Upper stories tower over the street below, and Tobho lives above his shop. The double doors have ebony and weirwood carvings of hunting scenes. 2 stone knights, armoured in red suits of armour in the shapes of a griffin and unicorn, guard the entrance. Tobho employs a slim serving girl in his house, as well as several apprentices. While it is one of the more expensive locations, it does give us an idea of what the rest of the street may look like. This location is key, just prior to the death of Robert Baratheon. Investigating the death of Jon Arryn, Lord Eddard Stark, the Hand of the King, visits the shop, like his predecessors, where he found one of the king's bastard children, a boy named Gendry, working as a smith's apprentice. It's believed that both Jon Arryn and Stannis Baratheon had also visited the shop and saw Gendry. The legendary head knight Sir Duncan the Tall once said he saw Brendan Rivers, known as Blood Raven, and his raven's teeth walk up the Street of Steel, with Rivers leaving a lasting impression on the then young Duncan. Look under every bed. You know how fond my brother is of brothels. Sir Jaime Lannister to Adam Marbrand. A Feast for Crows Chapter 8, Jaime 1. The Street of Silk is located on the Hill of Rhaenys leading up to the Dragon Pit by the west. The street is known mostly for its brothels of varying expense, including the likes of Shatire's brothel, the Blue Pearl, and Mother's. There is a secret tunnel from Shatire's brothel to the Red Keep that was dug for an unspecific Hand of the King. Tyrion Lannister would later make use of this tunnel when visiting his secret mistress Shae during the War of 5 Kings. The brothel is a favourite of Robert Baratheon. He fathered a bastard girl on one of the whores who works there, whose mother called her Barra. The babe was killed shortly after the death of King Robert. Lord Stannis Baratheon and Jon Arryn visited Shatire's brothel when trying to identify bastards fathered by Robert, and they likely saw Barra. The earliest reference we have to the street comes during the early reign of King Jaehaerys, with his Pentoshi master of coin Rhaego Draz living in a manse located on the street, rather than staying inside the Red Keep, which would have been the norm. It would also become infamous during the later reign of King Jaehaerys for being the location for the death of one of his younger daughters, Princess Visera, before departing King's Landing to marry old Lord Theomore Manderley in White Harbour. Princess Visera visited the brothels on the Street of Silk with her companions for one last night of laughter. She died that night in a drunken horse race, breaking her neck when she fell from her mount. Given the drunken nature of the street, deaths of both high and low-born tend to be common. Prince Daemon Targaryen, the brother of King Jaehaerys I, was known to regularly frequent the street, something that became a near-daily occurrence during his time as Lord Commander of the City Watch. He was in one of the brothels when he referred to his short-lived nephew, Baelon Targaryen, as heir for a day, which resulted in the wrath of his brother and his exile. The courtful Mushroom claims Daemon once smuggled his niece, Rhaenyra Targaryen, to the Street of Silk to observe the whores at work. Daemon's paramour, Miss Saria, was known to have been a dancing girl in King's Landing. It is likely she worked in one of the brothels along the Street of Silk. According to Mushroom, King Aegon II fathered a bastard boy on a girl whose maidenhood he won at an auction in 123 AC. But much like a lot of Mushroom's tales, it's hard to tell fact from fiction. However, something that does add some credence to Mushroom's claim is that later, during the final weeks of the Dance of the Dragons, amidst the riots at King's Landing, a boy named Gaemon Palehair, who was claimed to be the bastard of King Aegon II, was raised up as king by whores at a brothel on the Street of Silk, during a period of time that became known as the Moon of Madness. His supporters were based out of the House of Kisses atop Rhaenys Hill. Much like with the gates of King's Landing, with some of the main streets of the city, we don't really know much about their history, other than really their location and one or two key events that happened there. The Street of Flies, despite its repugnant name, is in fact where most of the meat within King's Landing is traded, and thus is the location for most of the butchers in the city. We know this because on the feast day of our Father above in 133 AC, Lord Unwin Peake, the Hand of the King for King Aegon III during the Regency, had the dungeons of the keep emptied of all offenders, where he punished them publicly. There were so many prisoners the King's Justice, Sir Victor Risley, was aided in his task by Tessario the Tiger and his fingers. The courtful Mushroom describes the event as looking more like a butchery than an execution, and noted that Lord Unwin should have sent for the butchers from the Street of Flies instead of the Hand's Fingers. The Street of Looms is thought to be one of the poorest areas of King's Landing. One of the few times we see the street, Tyrion Lannister sees a dead body being eaten by crows. We believe the Street of Looms is where much of the textiles of King's Landing are produced and sold. The next street, the Street of Seed, is one of the streets we know next to nothing about. However, some speculate its name implies it could focus on the trading of farming and agricultural goods, or perhaps fresh fruits and vegetables brought into the city from nearby farmland. During the events of A Storm of Swords, Jaime Lannister, while travelling down the street, sees a begging brother, a sort of religious beggar, who's often doing so as a form of penance. This beggar was praying for the recently deceased Joffrey Baratheon. It is thought that originally the Street of Silver was supposed to act as a sort of financial district for Jaehaerys' vision of King's Landing, but it is very much clear that by the time of the main book series, this certainly is not the case, with it being one of the roughest areas of the city, famous for its many gambling dens. During the events of A Clash of Kings, Sir Jacelyn Bywater, the commander of the Goldcloaks, reports to Tyrion Lannister that Timett, son of Timett, one of Tyrion's clansmen from the Vale, killed a wine seller's son at a gambling den on the Street of Silver. The Street of the Sisters is one of 4 straight streets which start at an unnamed great square at the very centre of King's Landing. The street connects to the Great Set of Baelor atop Visenya's Hill to the Dragon Pit atop the Hill of Rhaenys, and thus why the street is named the Sisters. It is also the location of the Guild Hall of the Alchemists. It is believed that at some point during her youth, Baelor Targaryen took part in a drunken horse race down the street. The street seems to be a commonplace for horse racing, as we know of many occasions where it happens. For instance, in the build-up to the Hand's Tourney towards the end of King Robert's reign, there were countless drunken races. While these are the main 7 streets of the city, there are 3 other large streets, known as ways. Unlike the streets, the ways don't tend to focus on a specific trade, and are wider, designed more as a means of traversing the city quickly. This is helped by the fact, for the most part, these ways are straight, going from one end of the city to the central square. These ways are often connected to each other and other key streets of the city by many other smaller squares. The Street of the Sisters technically also functions as a way. The God's Way starts at the unnamed Great Square at the centre of King's Landing, leading northeast to the Gate of the Gods. The King's Way leads from the same central square towards the Red Keep, hence the name King's Way. The Shepherd's Way runs eastward from Cobbler's Square up to the Dragon Pit, atop the Hill of Rhaenys.